Welcome back to Tea and Couch with Alisa, where we spill all the tea about sexuality. I'm your host, Alisa Brunetti Mukai, and today on the couch we have Joelle. Welcome back, Joelle.
Hi.
Hi, thank you
Excited
for
to be here.
coming back.
Yeah.
So, first, please introduce yourself and what we're going to talk about today.
Hi, I'm Joelle Marcelle. I am a somatic coach and body worker, and I'm also a trans woman, and I'm neurodivergent. And today we're going to talk about my gender transition and how somatics plays into that.
Yes, it's going to be a very interesting episode. Thank you for being so open to talk about this in public. So, first of all, just to clarify, you were assigned as a male at birth and you're transitioning to a woman.
Yes. Yeah.
And first of all, when in life did it start to make sense about who you are?
hmm Um, I do have memories from childhood,
Mm.
which is not always a case for every trans person for whatever reason. But I do have a few vivid memories from like when I was about maybe 5 years old, when I was like under my blanket, crying and sort of wishing or whatever, praying um, to grow up to be a beautiful, long, blonde-haired woman. That's a memory that I remember very vividly, and a memory that I've been trying to suppress for most of my life. But that's not when it started to make sense because I was so young and I didn't have a lot of, or I didn't have any like support or understanding around gender. And growing up as as an identical triplet, um, our gender was always very collective. So it wasn't just like you are a boy, but like we are boys, and like we were, dressed the same way. It was always like uh, more of the boyish colors or things like that. And that, um, you know, I think really shaped how what was possible for me. So also my brothers and I, we have been on the media quite a lot since we were literally 6 months old.
Really?
Yes. And we've been doing different creative things like, we had a band, we used to do modeling, and we there was a time when people would recognize us in the street in Estonia, um, or like when I would before transitioning, when I would go on dates, I always had a question of like, do you know who I am, or do I need to introduce myself? Because like most people would know who I was, and so that you're asking about like when did it click for me, or when did it start to make sense for me. It started slowly, but the signs were always there. What really helped me was when I first moved to the States in 2016 to do like a semester abroad, and it was the first time when I felt kind of anonymous, living in a new place, and like no one knows me or no one can recognize me. um, and that's where like first initial feelings started coming up. I remember I had an ex who I didn't have any words for this back then. I didn't think that I was trans. I just knew that I have these feelings of like uh, yeah, that weren't even very like clearly shaped yet or clear to me. But I did like try on some of her clothes, and yeah, and that was like really supportive. But I lived there only for like a half a year, and then I moved back, and we were doing long distance. And then the relationship ended. So when I was back in Estonia, and also the relationship had ended, I had less of that freedom to explore these parts of myself. And then I moved back to the States in 2019 to do my master's there. And although it was in Nashville, kind of in the South, it was a very progressive university where like there was like an assumption that if you didn't say that you're straight, people assumed that you're queer in some way among like my classmates. And it was the most diverse group of people that I had ever been with in terms of sexuality, also gender. Like now, counting myself and one other person, there's I think 10 trans people of 80 or so. So about like one in eight people were trans, which is a really high percentage. And so I I looking back, I had most of my friends were actually trans, like most of my closest friends, and um, I didn't really accept myself or even realize these things about myself when I was living in the States. But I I did buy my first like feminine clothes when I was living in Nashville, but it was so repressed still. Like I would like try on those clothes just in my room, but I wouldn't even come out to my trans friends or other friends there. And and then I kind of again had to move back to Estonia, um, and kind of accidentally came out to one of my exes. And that was a very unsupportive conversation. She was like, "Why didn't you tell me sooner? I would have never dated you." And I was like, "But I don't have anything to tell you because I don't even know that part of myself yet." And because again, back then I wasn't even considering that I'm trans. I was just like, "Oh, maybe I just like to cross dress or whatever." Um, but then because this conversation was so hard, I started coming out to my friends back like Nashville and like my mostly my US friends who were really supportive and gave me like a lot of space to just they were like, gender is basically play. Like you can play with your gender. You can try out things. It doesn't have to mean anything about your gender. Like you can play with your gender expression, but it doesn't have to mean anything about your gender identity. It could mean that you're trans, but it doesn't have to. And yeah, having those conversations over like a half a year or a year period, I finally started like realizing like, okay, I am trans. I do feel like it is a core part of my identity. I am a woman, and over the next years, I started exploring more with makeup, with clothing, with my style, um, and also I came out to my family, which is another conversation, or like a longer topic. But yeah, I would say like it's been a process. There have been some like formative moments and things that really um, helped me recognize those things. As I said, like seeing other trans people. Like I think 2019 was the first year when I moved to Nashville that I actually met trans people, um, and it wasn't just a concept on like um, on social media or something. And yeah, so I started to feel this resonance, like, oh, I actually resonate with these experiences. The same way for me, like with neurodivergence and realizing I'm neurodivergent is like, oh, I realized most of my friends are neurodivergent. And so I'm seeing similarities. And then the other part of getting in contact with myself and my gender is because of the somatic work that I've done with my coach and the trainings that I've gone through that have really helped me to get in touch with my body and with my body in a gendered way.
Mm.
Yeah.
And how did studying about somatics help to and supported your transition?
Mm-hmm. Um, I've been working with my coach for like 3.5 years, kind of, yeah, regularly. And they are an intersex, non-binary person, and I was like, they're not from Estonia, but we work online, and I was like, I have two questions, main questions that I have. how do I know that I'm trans?
Mm.
Because so much of our societal expectations around transitioning is like you have to be 100% sure and you shouldn't, and like you can't regret it, which I really disagree with this stance. So that was one of my questions of like, how do I know that I'm trans? And once that became clearer through coaching sessions, through getting in touch with my body, feeling like actually, what does my body feel about this? Or having different moments where I would, either do my own makeup or someone would do, like a friend, like the first time a friend did my makeup and I was like wearing feminine clothes. um I was looking at the mirror and there was just like this pure sense of joy and relaxation and like what I later realized, a good word for that is euphoria, like gender euphoria, of like really resting back into myself, of like, oh, this feels right, this feels like me, this feels like home. And so through these different experiences, I finally was like, okay, yes, I'm trans. Like, this feels right in my body. Um, and again, our bodies give information about our feelings, our sensations. Like, all of that is information of what we long for. And that's what we really work in coaching with. And then the second question that came up for me was like, okay, now that I know that I'm trans, um, what steps do I take? Especially given that I'm an identical triplet, that my family's reaction was not really supportive, and um, and yeah, more in general too. Like, what are the changes that I want for my body? And that was also another just a slow process of, because I really had to navigate not being able to be out while I started hormones, because my family wasn't okay or ready with that, and some other things too. And so there was a lot of navigating of like, how do I do these steps and in which order? And also, yeah, in Estonia there's a whole medical system that we have to navigate too, unfortunately. Yeah, so
And I'm sure there's a lot of like, again, the social like should be and the shame and a lot of misconception about being trans. Um, which one of them have you faced, and like which one of them do you wish that people would just unlearn?
well, the main thing is that the main narrative still to this day about being trans is that we are born in the wrong body. And I don't think our bodies are wrong. I think our bodies are good and wise and uh, right. And being trans in my trans body, um, part of that is the wisdom that I want to change. That my body needs to change, and it's not changing. I'm not changing my body because she is wrong. I'm changing her because she is because of the wisdom that's in my body. And it, for some people, might sound as semantics, but to me, it's really important that we don't view trans people as wrong, because that can often lead to like infantilizing us and like medical professionals saying what is right for us, but actually for us reclaiming our bodies and our voices to say like, no, we are good and we are right and we know what our bodies need. And part of being true to our bodies um, is changing, is transforming, is transitioning. And so yeah, and I think that is really also informed not just by my own lived experience, but also by somatics. Because in somatics, we don't focus as much on what's wrong or what we're fighting against, but more about what is right, what we're fighting for. And because we say that the body learns on yes. And so the idea really is that we can know what we're fighting against, but if we're not sure or clear about what we're fighting for or what we want more in our lives, then we're not really going to get there. And so I think that's also really important when we talk about trans people, is that our bodies are not wrong. Some people might resonate with that narrative because of dysphoria and because of the discomfort that we feel in the way that we are often seen. Not like how we feel ourselves, but how other people project what they project onto us. And also that because of that, our lived experience, we are wise and we can make decisions for ourselves, that we don't need professionals to make choices for us. So I would say that's like one really big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's more. Do you want to hear more?
Yeah, let's hear it.
I think in general, like connected to that, and I know you wanted to ask about masculinity, femininity, is that our gender expression does not have to suit for cisgender people. So people who are not trans. Like, we don't have to perform a specific type of, like, I don't have to perform a specific type of femininity or being a woman in order to be one. Or, and at the same time, I can do that. So often the misconceptions that I hear, or the things that I really dislike that I hear from often cisgender people, is like, either why are you so hyper feminine, which is often a phase that many trans women go through at the beginning of their transition, just because they are finally feeling like, oh, I can embrace femininity. I can, maybe I'm not on hormones yet, so I'm trying to compensate that a little bit with more feminine makeup or nails or clothing. But that gets often like seen as a parody of being a woman. But that's also valid. Like for cis women or trans women, we can be in that kind of femininity. Or it's also fine if I'm not doing any of that and I'm wearing more masculine clothes or like no makeup. And in that, I can still be a woman. And to me, it's important not just for how we see trans people, but also how we see gender in general. Because the more our wide range of gender expression is accepted, the more it's also accepted for you, like for cis women. And I think that's also really important to see this as a common fight or a common goal, because the more free I can be in my gender expression, the more free can you as well.
Yeah, of course, because I can get inspired
Yeah.
and like express more of my, because I am a cis woman and like I do like being my femininity, but I do want to like learn how to present myself masculine also. So for people like that, like who want to learn how to access their femininity and masculinity, what kind of advice would you give?
First, I also have a little bit of a beef with this
With this spectrum.
with the spectrum, and especially the way often these ideas like divine feminine, divine masculine are used. To me, it often feels very much like a perpetuation of patriarchal norms, of like feminine energy is nurturing and feminine energy is quiet and soft and all that. And the masculine energy is strong and active and dominant and whatnot. And so I think these are two different kinds of energies that we can talk about, but I wouldn't use a gendered language for them. I think these are qualities that are present in all of us, despite our assigned gender at birth or our gender identity. And like bringing it back to like kink topics, for example, kink has actually really helped me understand or decouple this myth that I also was sort of embodying in a way, that domination equals masculine or masculinity. Like femdom, for example, has really helped me to get in touch with my own femininity while it's connected to power and domination, which again, often we put those things into separate categories. And so when I talk about these two energies, I think we can talk more about in like BDSM language, like dominant or submissive, or in maybe like a more somatics language, like acting and doing, or sorry, acting, doing, and feeling and sensing. So yeah, I think that's really important for me when we talk about the masculine and feminine inside of us, that it would not be so informed, or like those energies wouldn't be so informed by typical gender constructs, because they are just constructs. We are all more active and more dominant in some way, and we're all more present or being, and maybe submissive in another way. And I wouldn't even say that those are two things. It's a more of a spectrum of things. Yeah.
And what topics around sexuality and kink do you want to see people talk more?
In general, I want people to talk more about like actual things, like real things.
Like what exactly you're doing in bed?
Yeah, and like edgy things, and
Yeah.
to be honest about like these are all the things that we are dealing with, or even like the topic of gender dysphoria and euphoria. I don't think of them as like just trans specific topics. We all have a sense of like how my gender feels right to me.
Oh yeah.
Like a cis man is working out at the gym to look more buff because that maybe aligns with his gender, or maybe he doesn't want to do that and he actually wants to I don't know, paint his nails, or like, you know. So all of us have a felt sense of our gender, and so I think we can be more honest about that. And the same goes for any kind of sexual interests, any of these taboo topics, be it sexual orientation, or more like sexual activities, kink things. Yeah, that's the overarching thing, that I just want us to be more real and honest, because we're all thinking these things, and it and I also want to validate that it feels really scary. Like, I feel a little scared being this honest on this podcast right now, because many of those things are in the wider societal like norms. It's not okay to talk about those things, or it has to be a certain way. So yeah.
How did your relationship with your own body changed throughout this transition?
Mm-hmm. I'll start more with like internal changes. So one of the things that I really started noticing through my own somatic work with my coach, and through trainings and receiving body work myself, was like how many, again, we use this term called armorings, or armoring bands, like how many of my armorings or tensions and contractions in my body were deeply gendered. And what I mean by that is like, okay, a story. So one practice that that we were given during the training was to go into any kind of public space to kind of people watch and notice where and how different armorings showed up in their body. Like where they might be tight, like their jaw or their shoulders, like maybe like collapsed inward, or, you know, or their legs, or where are they moving more or less. And one time I went to the gym to do this, and of course that's kind of obvious, but it was a really good time, really, like, to take that time to really see how like these like masculine, you know, armorings often tend to be in like wider shoulders, like, not, I'm not just meaning the size of muscles, but how people hold their body and hold their muscles, and how often men tend to be, well, many of us tend to be disconnected from our legs for different reasons, but yeah, there's a lot of this like puffing up, making yourself wide, which is societally acceptable for men to do, right? And less so for women and queer folks. Or even how people were training themselves, like, you know, also myself, before coming to terms with my own gender, like I was kind of overcompensating by trying to look and be more on the hyper masculine side of like a lot of, working out my upper body, and how also people are divided into how the gym is sort of divided. Like men tend to be more where you work your upper body, women tend to be more in the areas where you work more of your lower body. So all of that, like noticing those things about other people and noticing how in my body too, like how I am tensing in those ways, armoring in those ways that are more masculine in a way. Um, and and then starting to notice like that doesn't really feel right for me. That's more of like an expectation, and I want to be softer. I want to be, um, and again, that's not necessarily gendered. We can all be softer without having to be trans. But yeah, there's a lot of nuance there. Also, like during bodywork sessions, like starting to notice different parts of my body that I wasn't very connected with. Like to me, for example, I feel like a deep sense um, of gender euphoria in my thighs, and like I would say like a felt sense of femininity in my thighs. Um, and it's also connected to, for example, when I do work out at the gym and I do work out my legs and my butt, that I do feel gender euphoric after having done so. So a lot of this sort of nuanced internal work around noticing how I was in my body, how a lot of that was like I'm supposed to be that way in my body, and then noticing like how do I really want to be, and how that might be connected to my gender expression. And the other part of that is that at first I identified as bigender, so meaning like that I was okay with identifying both as a man and a woman, depending on how I was presenting, and then using different pronouns and names for each. But then one of my coach friends who were doing the training with, she asked me like, "Hey Joelle, like, are you really bigender, or are you just doing it to make it easier for your family?" And so moments and questions like that was also like really eye-opening to me, because I am a people pleaser, and I, through getting in touch with my body, I have started to learn to actually notice my needs, notice that I even have needs, and then ask for what I need and state my boundaries and take those steps. And so that was one of the steps that I took. Like, okay, I'm not bigender. I'm just like a woman. I'm Joelle, and so that's a lot of that internal work. Yeah, and I would also say it's been changing with hormones and with more of the external changes, although hormones are also very internal. Like the felt sense of being on testosterone versus being on estrogen and progesterone is so different.
Yeah.
Like I remember like the first days, like even though I started on a very low dose and I didn't take any testosterone blockers, um, just like yeah, it felt very different, and it continued to feel very different in the sense of like life feels, I would say, smoother. When on testosterone, life felt very like angular, like things happened fast, and maybe there was also a bit more motivation to do things, or like to like let's do this. Then estrogen has changed that quite a bit, but also the external changes, like the more feminine my body has become, the softer my like features have become, the more like the less makeup I feel like I need to put on to look or feel feminine, because like the things that made me look more masculine before have started to change and are not as present anymore. Or that's also a really common thing that trans people talk, or trans women talk about, that if they didn't like men before, then they started to also like men or only like men after starting estrogen. And I don't know all the reasons why that happens, but to me, I think it was easier for me to accept that I'm trans than to accept my attraction towards men.
Okay.
Because when I was growing up as a boy, uh, you know, it was such a taboo to be gay or to like do anything that was remotely gay. Talking about being trans wasn't really something that people even talked about, right? And so I feel like my internalized homophobia was much like stronger than actually my internalized transphobia. And so the more I started to feel and look like a woman, um, the easier it started for me to accept that I also like men. And so that's another like change that has definitely happened. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I want to ask, what transition are you looking forward to right now? Not only about your body, but like about the person you want to become.
Uh, about my body, I wish my boobs were bigger.
I can share half of mine.
Thank you. I would take it. It's just like to fit my frame more. Like I don't think boobs have to be big. I just feel like it would be more like make more sense with my like wider shoulders. But I like my little boobs. Um, Other than that, like yeah, physically, I don't think there's anything else. But who I'm becoming, I really like who I'm becoming. Like I really feel like last year I explored a lot of my especially sexuality and made some difficult professional decisions. And I feel like I'm really growing into this whole self where all these different parts of myself, my gender identity, my sexual identity, my professional identity as a coach, they're all really coming together. Also my like personal relationships. And so I'm really excited to the question I had, I remember the day when I came out publicly. I'll tell this story and then I come back to the question. When I came out publicly a year and a half ago, so the fall of 2024, and by publicly, I mean I came out at my work to my colleagues. I changed my names on, social media and like name and gender and all these things like profile photo. Until then, I had only been like out sort of a couple of years, 3 years or so, just to my family and friends. But I didn't go to work as Joelle. Um, and when I came out, and on the evening of that, I set up a session with my coach to kind of process my feelings after all of this because there was so much like actually so much love, and I was really overwhelmed by the support that I got because I was really afraid and thought that there would be a lot of like hate and backlash. And then doing this session with my coach, I was like, it's so funny how life really goes in cycles. Because like we had talked about this like butterfly metaphor, which is like a really common metaphor for trans people, which I resonate with. And it might be cliche, but I think it's so true that we kind of start off as one thing and then we like as this caterpillar, and then we get into this cocoon or chrysalis, and then we like what happens inside is like the caterpillar just like melts into this goo and then completely rearranges itself. Although it's still made of the same part, like the same, stuff, it's completely changed. And then what that felt like was sort of clawing my way out of this cocoon, this chrysalis, and then um, like spreading my wings. And I was like, oh, this is the end. But it's not the end. It's like this cycle of exploration starts again. Um, and because I was like, I actually don't know who I will be in the world. I have been very like fragmented. I have been out with my friends, but not at my work. I have been out when I'm going to coaching trainings, but again, not in Estonia. And so, how do I put all of these things together? Like that was like an exploration of not new parts, but all the parts of me in one whole.
Yeah, because you have so many layers to it, Joelle. Honestly, you're one of the most interesting person I know. Because you have this past of being Christian, you have past of being assigned as a male, you have this whole interesting story about somatics.
I don't know if you know, but I used to do and still want to come back to doing spoken word poetry.
Oh yeah,
I'm an artist.
yeah.
Yes, there's all these things.
Yeah, but well, for
Yes.
today, we will wrap up.
Well,
maybe,
focusing on these
maybe
parts.
we make another episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so what just coming back to the question of what I'm most excited for is, like, I am also finding still new things out about myself, and I'm so excited to embrace those parts, and then, like, first maybe more on my own, like as I have done with like kink and sexuality exploration last year, and then slowly and in a little bit of a shaky kind of way, bringing it more out into my relationships, and then into the world and into my work. And so I we have this concept in just want to come back to this cycle metaphor, like this concept, like rhythm of aliveness in somatics, and it's about how life moves outside of us but also inside of us. So there's this awakening phase when, like, a seed starts to sprout, or an emotion starts to rise, or an idea is like, oh, I have this idea. Then there's this increasing phase where it starts to grow, and where you really, like, start to put more energy and attention into it. The little, like, plant is growing like a little branch or something there. And then there's this containment or deepening phase where the tree has grown into this big tree. It has its fruit, or the emotion has grown into its fullest expression, where we also express our emotions, like crying, laughing. It's the fullness of the life. And then it comes into a completion, where the apple falls from the tree back into the ground, where the emotion kind of subsides. And so the cycle is really important, because I feel like I'm always in this cycle. And it's actually kind of more of like this, that in some ways I'm going through these same questions and same parts of transformation over and over again, but I'm bringing everything that I've learned with me, like really, like somatically, like it's in my body, right? And so I'm excited, yeah, to just keep going and keep changing. And I don't know who or what I will be in the future. Um, as a deeply curious person about the world, I can imagine that, um, you know, new things will unfold. And yeah, another thing I just want to mention, that I read about this, and this is like my wish to myself, but also to anyone watching this, or my clients, is that this idea that, like, again, like a seed is growing into its fullness of a tree, or an embryo into an adult person, that in the same way, may we all unfold into the fullness of who we are. And and that's, yeah, I think that's like a beautiful and a scary thought, because a lot of the parts and things that we are is not, it's those things are not widely accepted in the society. Yeah.
Well, this was a great episode. Thank you, Joelle. What is so to close our episode, what is a tea you want to spill to your younger self about your transition?
um, hmm. Well, I think it's kind of similar. It's like, it's gonna be so much harder than you you think it would be.
Mm.
And also there will be, like, finally there will be at some point more support than you also thought that there could be.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's gonna be so worth it. And like, before coming out or before starting to accept that I'm trans, I was like calculating in my head, like, what is the best way for me to be in the world?
Mm.
As a man, I could use my privilege and I could, like, do a lot of good in the world this way. Again, as a person who often thinks about others, um, like, I was like, oh, maybe it's better if I don't transition. Maybe it's like I could do more good in the world if I stayed as a man. And now I'm just thinking, like, I'm so glad that for that or whatever other reason that I didn't, and I had the courage to take these risks because yes, I think by being fully myself, I'm doing so much more good in the world than if I had stayed in this small uh, mask or
Mhm.
cage of, like, what is expected of me. And that's actually not the only focus. The main thing is that I'm my happiest and I'm my most alive when I follow my own process, when I follow my body, and when I follow what I long for.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you so much, Joelle.
Yeah.